Hello, everyone. My name is James, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Welcome to Enhancing Network Security, Segmentation, and Protection Strategies. Joining us today, we have two speakers from Moxa. The first is Felipe. He is a cybersecurity director and a certified instructor in industrial cybersecurity by ISA and EC Council. He holds more than 30 certifications and a Master of Science. With over 20 years of experience in the industrial sector, he specializes in developing mission-critical solutions with cybersecurity at the forefront. Felipe has presented and published articles globally, including at the NASA Artificial Intelligence Congress. And also joining us today here is Marty Wachi, our product marketing manager. Marty specializes in industrial cybersecurity, network management, and wireless networking. He has over 20 years of experience at companies like Apple, Bay Networks, Nortel Networks, D-Link Systems, and Cisco. And he has launched over 1,200 products globally, including routers, switches, wireless access points, and much more. Okay, so some housekeeping items before we jump into our presentation. The webinar is going to be 60 minutes, including some time for Q&A at the end. If you'd like to submit questions, please use that Q&A function in Zoom. You will also see the occasional poll question pop up on your screen. We encourage you to participate in those. The recording itself will be shared, so you can go back and watch the webinar on demand. And there will also be a survey at the end. We appreciate if you could give us your feedback on the presentation. So with that in mind, I'll go ahead and pass it off to Felipe to kick off our webinar. Felipe.
Hello, thank you, James. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. And today we will talk about how to protect our industrial control systems. We will split this session basically in three parts. The first one, we will talk about network segmentation. I will elaborate a little bit more. And also how we can make a step forward and make it like fortify, how we can enhance the good practice that eventually we're doing. In the last part, I will share the presentation with Marty that will talk more about how to manage very complex OT networks. Excuse me. All right, with that being said, I would like to start first with just like a minor comment. I do believe that it's a really hot topic, artificial intelligence, and although it's not the main focus of our conversation today, I believe that it's too valid to share a couple of thoughts around this topic and how it relates to industrial control system. So basically, right, we have a lot of enhancements, and here it's two different, let's say, magazines, the Forbes ones sharing the same, let's say, news around artificial intelligence. One of them, we are seeing basically hackers on the left that are using to really explore industrial control systems. And the right, we are seeing basically the defense part, the blue teams, how they are using AI to enhance their system. So basically, the ecosystem is leveraging AI somehow in different phases, and a couple of solutions that we have in our portfolio also leverage AI. But it's important to say, absolutely, we will have parts of the attacks that are more sophisticated, and I will elaborate a little bit more on that in a minute. But it's important to understand that absolutely you always have this part of the attacks that we should be aware, and absolutely they are sophisticated, but we also need to make sure that we are doing the basics and we are doing all the checks to make sure all the, let's say, the most constant and most, let's say, likely type of attacks we are covered. So this is along the lines will be what we are going to present today is how we can make sure that we will be covering the most common type of attacks. And absolutely, we are aware that it's a journey that we need to keep evolving in terms of how to protect these most advanced ones. With that being said, I would like to share this draw that is from CISA, that is the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency from Homeland Security. I made like a manual allocation, if you will, with those who are familiar with the security levels from EAC 6443. This is somehow I see the overlap of those, right? You can see the secure levels 1, 2 behind the area that we are calling defensible architecture, and also you see on the right, sorry, you see the secure levels 3 and 4 that are the ones that I was referring when I started this presentation, saying that absolutely we will have a portion of these attacks that we call APT, that is advanced persistent threats, and a couple of other sophisticated types of attacks that will leverage AI, and they are leveraged already. But this is not our goal for that conversation today. We will be targeting basically these most common. As you can see the chart, they are responsible for the average of 70 and 80% of the major type of attacks, and specifically industrial control systems. So all the things that we will share during this webinar with you guys are around this, how we can make sure that we have a defensible architecture and we are covering the base to most likely protect against the most common type of attacks. With that being said, we created these two, let's say, bases, right? We talk a little bit about AI and also what we're planning to talk and where we believe it fits in terms of cybersecurity initiative. But now I would like to bring to you guys a pull question to understand how you see our company actually is dealing, considering these two different, let's say, technologies or concepts. And you have a couple of options to answer. So the first one is your company seeing they're very strategically and they are tied together, or they see as different things, and definitely they should be treated separate. And usually it's something that you're not really involved with. So yeah, we are seeing a lot of questions coming, and usually what I have been seeing, specifically industrial control system, AI is something that they are kind of still resistant to adopt. But definitely in a couple of areas in user cases, we are seeing that we are starting to see some applications for AI. So I believe the scenario that I have nowadays is one, but definitely it's changing based on all the things that are happening. And I appreciate the response. We still have some coming, but I believe we are good. We can close this out. And I would like to also invite Marty to comment. But I believe the majority of our audience, they see these two different technologies, or let's say concepts, totally separate. They definitely define so far. So I'm gonna close out this and let's share the results. And as you can see, the vast majority of the audience is considering two different things. So Marty, do you have any comment that you'd like to share around AI, cybersecurity? How do you see nowadays as you use a lot of AI in your product line?
Yeah, no, it's interesting to see that, almost a little bit more than half see them as totally separate initiatives. It'd be interesting as a follow-up question if that's more because of organizationally different parts of the organization may be in charge of AI versus cybersecurity. I think from my perspective, they are somewhat tied together because, you do need to connect everything in order to take advantage of some of the AI stuff. And in doing so, there's obviously cybersecurity risks. So yeah, that'll be interesting, something for us all to probably dive into more, and probably even future webinars.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mark, for the inputs. And like I explained, I see definitely they are considered separate initiatives as well in the major projects that I talked to. But I believe that is a trend that eventually it will be combined somehow, because definitely, like we just started, we can leverage AI in different ways, right? Absolutely, we're not saying that we should give all the responsibility to AI, but definitely we have a good user case that can actually make it really fast and help on the decision-making process. So with that being said, let's move forward with our intended content for today. So when we talk about defense architecture, right, actually this is a term that was coined for different professionals a couple of years ago. but I kind of like this concept because it's a combination of different things. So we talk a lot about segmentation, but segmentation is a part of that, right? We also need to work with risks. You should understand the business basically goals and all the other things that are important, right, in order to really have a strategy behind your decision. So segmentations, fortifying all the things that we are sharing during this webinar, they are definitely important, but they are part of a strategy. So a couple of frameworks that we will share, but specifically E643, it's really heavily designed around the risk assessment process and how we really map your vulnerabilities, your business goals, and how to make sure you are investing money in the right place. You are segmenting, you are fortifying the right place. So just this important, let's say, highlight in terms of the strategy, because all the things that we will share in the next slides, and so they are really more tactical, and also you understand your goals. Now you can start to make decisions. And I will give a couple of, let's say, guidance and a couple of good practices that you can use, but definitely I would like to start and make sure we are on the same page, that definitely all the decisions should be based in a very good strategy that combines risk and business goals. With that being said, part of that I will explain in the next slides. We will talk about one concept that is really, really well known, that is defense in depth. And after, I will explain a couple of ways that we can do this secure network device. We can break down. We will talk about hardening and a couple of other, let's say, technical ways that we can deploy the segmentation itself. But segmentation also means basically secured appliance and how you deploy firewalls and other things. So this will be a complementary conversation. I will focus more in the switching, how the switching can be more active in the segmentation, because I believe the firewall and all the rules around those are kind of clear that they do a good job when well configured in terms of segmentation. But I will try to give this extra mile in how we can leverage your switches that you already have and make it their part of this strategy. And we will also talk about some things that can make it easier for a management perspective. We will see that it's definitely an important aspect to have it consistent, and visibility and other things that are important to really give the extra step after you made a very good segmentation, how we can improve that segmentation. This is what we're calling here fortifying. And all this combined can be somehow named this defense architecture, right? And we have a couple of things that I will not cover, neither Mari, during the presentation, but they are also important. And eventually, if it's something that you are interested with, please let us know. Definitely, we can have follow-up conversations. And but I just reinforce, if you have any questions, if any related to a slide or something that I mentioned, please, I encourage you to send your questions in the Q&A, so we can already receive those and make sure we will answer during our Q&A section. With that being said, the first one, I want to make sure that we are on the same page. Segmentation, usually the first thing that comes in mind is, all right, we need to do a layered approach or defense in depth. That is a really solid concept, and even for 643 perspective, we are considering like a standard way to make the segmentation is defense in depth. And just for those who are not familiar with, if you're new in the industrial control system or never heard before, the idea is you have several layers of challenge, considering from a attacker perspective, to make difficult where you have usually a very critical asset that you want to make sure that it not be breached. You want to create different layers of challenge for an attacker to reach that point. So this is overall a concept around the defense in depth, but more than that, it's also considered, let's say, backups and different technologies. So just to reference, if you are considering, for example, protections, physical protections, you also need to think maybe in all different layers and also model. So layer 1, 2, 3. So how you're protecting these layers against different types of attacks. So it's not just a matter of different, let's say, physical products, if you will, but also how you are deploying the configurations and make sure you are trying to cover all these different layers of protection. This is just an example that both organizations, ISA perspective, that is what we call SDO, Standard Development Organization, and also CISA specifically in terms of industrial control systems and inside the structure of homeland security. All of them, they recommend somehow the defense in depth concept. So just to have a better idea about our audience, which of these usually looks like your network? Because definitely we will describe in the next slides that we may do different things with the technology, right? So if you have, let's say, more advanced products, you can do more. If you have less advanced, you can do less, basically that. So just to have an idea, right, how it looks like your network nowadays. We have a couple of options, unmanaged. They are pretty much more common and are very cost effective. And now we are starting to see more new kind of intermediary products that we call light managed or smart switches, that they have some intelligence and you can bring some let's say some protection to the network. And obviously you have the managed switches that usually have more functionalities and more power to deploy all the things that we will describe next. I believe we receive a good number of response. I just give. All right, I believe we're good. Let's see the results. Looks like a lot of people that are watching us today, they have more managed switches. So that is awesome, because definitely we can leverage more all the recommendations that we will give during this webinar. But obviously, the second one is the combination that is really common, right? We have some parts of the network that are not as critical, and eventually you just communicate and want to have unmanaged switches. And a part of that you consider more important, and somehow you will communicate with upper layers, you have managed. So that is really consistent what we see. Thanks for sharing. Marty, do you have any comment that you'd like to do here about the typical architecture that we are seeing here?
Yeah, thanks, Felipe. It's interesting, again, the breakdown, I guess I would say, in the context of the section that I'll do kind of at the end for the folks that have the unmanaged switches, you know, assuming that those are probably maybe some smaller networks versus larger networks. You know, the larger networks are definitely going to be harder to manage and automate if you're using unmanaged switches. So we'll kind of touch on that, but it's good to know that there looks like there's a decent amount that have some mixture of unmanaged switches. So I'll keep that in mind when we're going through the network management to compare and contrast.
Thank you, Marty. Appreciate it. All right. So let's move forward. And I will actually now talk more about the couple of ways that we can do the segmentation. Like I explained at the beginning, considering that you are already doing the firewall segmentation, that is the most common one. Eventually, we have other webinars where we describe the zones concept. It's not what we're going to talk today. It's more how we can leverage these managed switches that we already have, right? So the first thing that we recommend, it's a concept that we call hardening. That is how we can make smaller or minimize the attack surface of the products you have. So basically, you try to close all the doors, all the things that you're not using to make sure it cannot be exploited, right? So a couple of, let's say, guidance in here. You have the standard, specifically EAC 6043, that has a certification around how the product should be built and if so, configured to deliver specific goals. But in general, any product should have a way to make the configuration better and in some means make it a hardened concept. And usually a good way to do it is what we're trying to do, your strategy, basically, and where you are located, and try to understand the risks you have there, and eventually how you can make this configuration address and minimize these specific risks. So the first thing is the hardening on the switches, for example. A good source of information usually would be the manufacturer, right? It's the first point to contact. Should you try to contact your manufacturer? Of the Moxa, we provide a couple of hardening guides to our products and give a couple of recommendations and how you can make it, let's say, minimize this attack surface that is basically deploying the concept of hardening guide. Other concepts that are a combination of things. I believe I will try to be honest with the time here, but a lot of topics that usually take a lot of discussion, right? So VLANs are more, in my opinion, more related to performance perspective, not really security. But definitely we see let's say a good usage of that, and definitely if you have a lot of information being transmitted, definitely it's a good way to segment the information itself and make sure you are not really having incident, for example, for multicasting that is definitely jeopardizing the communication on your network, creating a lot of broadcast, if you will. So definitely, it's not just a matter of text itself, but also good performance and good design in your network. So VLANs, I believe that it's better this second, right? That is pretty much more to help you have a better performance on your network. But it still is something that if you're not using, it's a good way to segment your communication logically in your network. Another resource that many of the devices that eventually you may have, they can have it, is the concept that's called ACL. That is stands for Access Control List. That is basically if you were working with layer 2, you can make some filtering in the layer 2 concerning OSI model, right? And if you are working with a layer 3, that usually it's more advanced type of product, you also can work with more type of filtering. But outside of the hardening that we just described, the ACL actually helps you give it this extra layer of segmentation. So you can block basically a MAC address in specific ports. You can even make sure you can make VLAN filtering and a couple of things according to the technology and the let's say the flexibility that your device have. But if you have this capability, check it out. Definitely something that you should combine with your strategy, because obviously we minimize the attack surface as well. But considering the most, let's say, advanced products, right? Moxa, for example, released a couple of new products that are much more advanced compared to the other lines that we had been selling for maybe 10 years. And it means that we have a new hardware, new platform. Mario explained more about basically the management platform, NMS perspective, but also the firmware that runs inside the switches. They also changed, right? And to allow us to give a different response to the market. For example, patching, something that is also considered defensible architecture. When we find a vulnerability, we fix it, patch that, and we provide to our customers how they can fix this specific vulnerability, right? So this is one way, and make sure that we are giving the speed that is needed according to the trends that we are seeing, right? The AI exploring even more the vulnerabilities. So definitely we had to expedite our time to market. So all of that actually culminate in a new type of product, and all the things that I'm sharing here, it's more related to these new families, but all the things that I said so far, they are valid, but basically any type of product, right? So this new generation, 3 new features, new to OT, I would say. Obviously, these features are living in IT for a very long time. So it's not really the concept itself, a newer technology, but it's the concept that now we can have this type of sophistication on an industrial hardware. As all of you may know, you need to have certification, isolation, and many other things to make sure you can transmit with reliability the information, and to add all this new security on the top of that without compromise reliability. So definitely, it's not a trivial thing, right? And we provided these upgrades that we also can add to our strategy of segmentation or defensive architecture. Three different type of, let's say, sophisticated protections. DHCP Snooping that usually try to avoid some type of exploration on GCP protocol. IP packet guard or IP source guard that is basically protected the IP level and try to avoid a couple of attacks that explore some of the vulnerabilities on those. And also Dynamic ARP Inspection that it goes exactly on the protocol that works together with IP, right? TCP IP. So definitely, I will not really dictate due to the time that we have, but definitely just give you some perception that these switches now, they are coming with more capacity, more security embedded, and definitely you should leverage that to add in your segmentation strategy or hardening, whatever you want to call it. You should try to leverage more these technologies to reinforce your strategy. Other thing that is important to say, we have a lot of remote access, and I believe after COVID, it actually increased dramatically the use of that. So how you do your remote access is also part of your strategy. Moxa, absolutely, we have a solution for that. But it's important to make sure you're doing this remote access in a most secure way. Encryption is one thing, but also how you manage the session and how you make sure you authenticate the person that is having access to your network. And even if you want to enable the access, right? You don't want to make this link open all the time. So all these things are quite interesting things to keep an eye on it. Going to the second part, and I have a few minutes to describe that. It's basically how we can make this extra step in terms of fortify the segmentation that we just described. So a couple of, let's say, good practices, right? So eliminate the protocols that are not secure, if possible, upgrade them, right? Use the most recent encryption, remove unnecessary user accounts. Probably if you follow a lot of the citation or forensics analysis of a couple of attacks that happen in industry, or even IT level, you see that a lot of these attacks, they leverage the user accounts that are not really eliminated, right? So definitely it's important to eliminate the user accounts that are not used anymore. Multi-authentication factor, this is also something that 643 also address. And a couple of things that you can use our material as a reference, but more than that, you also can use other additional research. You have INSA, basically National Security Agency, providing a couple of guidance in how to make more secure network. Like I said, another source of information is your manufacturer. Moxa, we provide a couple of guidance in terms of how to make your device more secure. And also you have NIST, EC 643, and syscontrols as a reference. Just a minor comment, syscontrols is more IT related. So although a lot of things are in common, we have a lot of overlap. So just be careful, because a couple of recommendations from there are not really OT minded, right? But it's still a good framework to be considered and combined with others that are pure OT related. So where's the challenge, right? The last part of my session. Consistency, it's a really challenge in OT. So we talk about configurations, we talk about make sure we have a strategy, but how I make sure now that I'm deploying it properly, consistently across different sites. So Mario will share more information about that, but definitely we have a software platform that can help you manage in the site level, but also in a central or a single glass level, you can see all the sites. So that is definitely helpful for a couple of reasons, but definitely you see that a couple of things that we describe as a good practice, we can do pretty much using a software platform. right? So disabling necessary ports, detecting new device, and so on. A couple of features that we embedded in our software, because it's not just a matter of the hardware to be capable, but also should be minded, the software should be minded about the security, and both together should have actually the combination and the ability to deploy all the things that we're sharing here, right? Although you can obviously do a lot of things manually, when you try to scale, obviously the software is probably the best way to go because you can make it consistently. That is the big challenge. And when we saw a lot of, let's say, attacks, we see that sometimes the lack of consistency is where hackers explore to do some type of exploration on the network. So backups are extremely important when we have an incident, the way that we can recover your system and make sure you can return to the operation with all the other procedures in place, but definitely to have a way to backup and restore your network is extremely important and also part of defense architecture. And just to name a couple of things, Mari will go in more details. Definitely all the main things that I just described, they are part of the new upgrade that we did in our platform software. That is definitely to make helpful to the consistent part, make sure we are covering all the basics and make sure our network is consistent and secure in a couple of ways. With that being said, I would like now to pass over to Mari to take from managing complex OT networks.
Hey, thanks, Felipe. So I think you saw from just everything that Felipe was covering that, when you just look at the fundamental backbone of these networks, that's really switching, it's getting a lot more complicated. As I talk about security customers, these are kind of some of the things that I see or some of the forces that are shaping some of these decisions. So starting with, everything needs to be connected. We've been seeing this for quite some time, the whole digitization of everything, really trying to do it so that we don't spend a lot of money up front, but at the same time, as you see the complexities that Felipe is talking about and trying to make sure that things are consistent, making sure that you have the right tools so that your OpEx doesn't get out of control in terms of trying to manage these systems. So the network management portion of it that we're going to talk about today is important. We asked the AI question because we are seeing this starting to come up a little bit. Obviously, OT trails IT a little bit, but a lot of the industrial networks stand to benefit probably more from AI than some of the IT networks. So there's a lot of questions that I don't think anybody has the answers to, but we are starting to see different things come up with our customers, depending on the industry, in terms of, are we going to connect everything? How is the data going to be collected? How is that data going to be shared? Is the AI models internally developed? Are we going to use third parties? How are you going to, grow and evolve the network? So those things are all kind of related to that first pillar of everything must be connected. Then the AI transformation, and then I think the financial stakes that are changing, both from an internal and external forces. You've got externally things like legal and regulatory types of things that are happening. We're all continuing to build networks and build stuff out. So CapEx and OpEx becomes things that we have to worry about. But then on top of that, I think there's a lot of the companies that are represented on this call and folks that we talk to that want to try and improve the efficiencies, get more out of their networks through AI, which is more of kind of internal consumption and stakeholders. So that's really driving the whole need for more visibility as well as security, assuming that you don't want your data to be open to whatever AI modeling company that you're working with. So these are things that at a very high level are kind of the three topics that resonate with a lot of the customers that I've been talking to this year. With that, I would say, for those of you that haven't seen our security model, it starts with the whole secure development, making sure that our lifecycle management starting with our suppliers, and all that is secure. The products, obviously, from some of the stuff that Felipe talked to earlier today. The piece that I'm going to focus on is more on the secure management. So the MX View 1, Central Manager, and MX Security, which is really going to help you scale your abilities to manage these things and have it with consistency, as well as just do it a lot more efficiently, right? And then obviously on the back end, having the right support and advisories are important for any vendor, right? Having said that, some of you that have maybe seen me present on network management may have seen this slide before, but basically being able to um, take a look at what part of the life cycle that you're in and say, okay, this is where I'm having a pain point. So whether it's provision, whether it's monitor, update, and maintain, maybe security policies and threat response, or troubleshooting and upgrading and replacing. We have a variety of different tools from Moxa to help you with that pain point. So obviously, if you guys have other questions about maybe something in particular, you can throw that in the chat or the Q&A section, and maybe we'll be able to answer that live, or maybe we'll be able to follow it up with you. But we have a lot of different tools for a lot of different situations. So that brings us to the next poll question, which is really, how do you use your network management? So I'd be really interested to hear from some of the different life cycle pieces. What do you guys see as some of the things that are keys for network management? And I think you can check multiple here. So we'll just give you a couple of seconds here to answer that. And this again will help us focus the rest of this presentation as well as future webinars in some of the areas that are of most interest to you guys. So let's just give you a few more seconds to answer this. We've got some more responses coming in.
I'll make a note here, Marty. This question was actually set up as a single choice, so we'll kind of take
Oh,
that into
okay,
consideration. Perhaps the
okay.
responses are more of like the
Number one,
primary,
okay,
right?
that's fine. All right, we still got people coming in. That's good. Getting a lot of answers here. So appreciate that. All right, looks like it's slowing down. So let's put up the results here. So it looks like a lot of you are most interested in network monitoring. The next biggest category are those people that aren't using network management at all. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for improvement there. I don't know, Felipe, anything jump out to you as far as any of the poll results?
Oh, I would say exactly that. The portion of people that are not using network management is absolutely place to start because, right, for many other reasons, the constant and even the ability to have visibility of the network is key for a defensible architecture. So agree with you.
All right, so let's keep going here. Okay, so as far as our main network management package, which most of you have been interested in, and that's MXV1. So just really quickly from a positioning perspective, so there's kind of two different buckets that these network management platforms kind of fall into. So you have companies that build primarily third-party SNMP managers, which means they don't have a network product. Their product is a network management package to essentially manage other people's products. So people like SolarWinds, What's Up Gold, those are your typical third-party dedicated SNMP managers. Then you have network vendor network management systems. So like from us, MXV1, Cisco DNA Center, Belden High Vision, and others, which are typically from the manufacturer of that hardware. Now, all of us have some capabilities to manage, third parties, but that's not really the function of our product. The analogy that I would use, and it kind of dates myself a little bit here, is kind of the difference between the remote that came with your home entertainment device versus maybe trying to buy a universal remote to control all of them. There's definitely some benefits and ease of use of having a universal remote, but it'll never do as good a job and have all the different bells and whistles and functions as the dedicated vendor's remote. And that's kind of the way that it is with network vendor NMS systems. So having talked about that, so why network management? So really network management's value is proportional to the size of network. So the bigger network you have, the more devices that you have, the more you're going to benefit from it. So some of you that may have smaller networks that may be using a lot of unmanaged switches and may have said, hey, I'm not using network management. Well, that might be the reason it's maybe going to be less relevant to you. But if you do have a decent sized network, if you are worried about security and consistency and some of these things, this is definitely something that can help you. One of the other things that network management does, from whether it's us or whatever network vendor, it really immediately upgrades your network capabilities. And I'll show that kind of in the next slide. So without any other hardware updates to your network, it usually gives you a lot of additional capabilities. And again, I'll show that in the next slide here. The other thing some of you mentioned, that you wanted was monitoring. Well, network management gives you a lot greater visibility into critical aspects of your network, and it also allows you to automate and secure your networks. So it gives you that scale, gives you that consistency that Felipe was talking about, as well as eliminates a lot of human error, because you can imagine if you've got, let's say, tens or hundreds of devices, and you're having to go out there and create all the right VLANs and ACL settings that Felipe was talking about, that could become very onerous, especially if you've deployed a lot of firewalls as well. So having said that, as far as upgrading your network, so this is again a Moxa example. For those of you that answered, you had managed switches from Moxa. By adding MXV1, all of these things that you see here, or most of them on this chart, get automatically upgraded to the whole network. So being able to look at things like your topology, being able to see everything that's going on there for monitoring and troubleshooting, some of the rogue device detection that we talked about, virtual device front panel, so not having to be at the device, but being able to see, what ports are active, what things are plugged in, being able to take advantage of some of our visualization for things like traffic view and fiber view, to be able to see how much traffic is going on in the network, see what kind of dB loss is on your fiber ports, all from a single pane of glass. Security view is a great way to audit your network. I think I've got a slide to talk about that a little bit later, so I'll skip that. This is where you also can get events and notifications centrally, as well as you can manage other SNMP devices and set traps for that. Being able to do network maintenance, this wasn't really a big response, so I'll skip that. The other one is MX security. This is specific to our firewalls. This is a big differentiator for us at Moxa. There's a question we'll get to in the chat a little bit later about prioritizing AI versus cybersecurity. But obviously, if you're looking at cybersecurity and trying to limit what third parties that you may be partnering with for AI have access to your network, you're going to want to deploy more firewalls. And deploying more firewalls means more things to configure, more policies are going to have to be deployed. And this is something from an OT perspective that a lot of our traditional OT firewall vendors don't have. This is a big differentiator for us. So what can I do with this from a visualization perspective? So traffic view shows you how much traffic is going on the network by percentage. This is a great way to, again, troubleshoot if you think things start to slow down. Great way to baseline your network so that over time, if you start to see the numbers start to increment, you may need, hey, I might need to increase some of the speed of these links, or maybe there's something else going on. Security view is again something that's unique to Moxa, as far as this allows us to go out and basically audit all of the devices on the Moxa network that are Moxas and tell you, what level of security are they, what things do I need to change. But more importantly, a lot of our customers are using this for compliance and auditing. So they'll use this to go back and make sure that things are what they say they are. And this is just a bigger version of the traffic view where you can see kind of the load segments here. Okay, so on the security wizard, so this gives you kind of the 3 different levels, and this is based on 62443, and you can see here what some of the things are that we're checking, and you're able to see at a glance. And this gives you, what are some of those things that we're trying to make sure are configured properly. But the nice thing about it is you can use this to initially configure your network and make sure it's configured properly from a device security level, but use this as an ongoing way to audit your network to make sure as over time things change on the network, you're making sure that things are still configured properly. Felipe shared this slide earlier. For those of you that haven't kept up with some of the advancements to MXV1 in the last 6 months, I put this slide together to mainly focus on switching. So there's a lot of other things that we've added, but primarily for you switch customers that have managed switches or maybe even some of our smart switches, a lot of these things are going to apply to you. So you've probably heard us talk about security view, traffic view, and fiber check before, but we've added things like warranty check to tell you like what Moxa devices are still under warranty, being able to detect rogue devices now as they get connected to the network or even other networking devices. Firmware updates and being able to schedule those updates has now been added. The other nice thing about this is we give you at a glance, hey, does this firmware update contain security patches or is it just feature upgrades? So helping you again to stay compliant and also keeping up to date with the latest and greatest patches from us. We have a password audit and updater function now. So for any of you that aren't running centralized Radius or LDAP or Microsoft domain authentication, and you might be for regulatory or internal requirements needing to change your passwords of all your networking devices regularly and have some crazy set of characters or types of characters. This now can all be automated from MXV1. So that's a great way of being able to make sure, first of all, what's the baseline of your passwords across your Moxa devices? How do I update that to make sure I'm staying in my security policy internal compliance? Um, Another great security feature for our switches is being able to block unused ports. So I know a lot of you have unmanaged switches, and one of the bad security things about unmanaged switches is if you have access to the switch, you can just plug in, get an IP address, and often you're running. The nice thing about this is we can use the network management software to, once the network's been set up, I can basically disable all the unused ports on my managed and smart switches and be able to make sure that people can't just walk up and plug stuff in. And the other neat feature that we have is being able to, at a very easy touch, disable all the unsecure management interfaces. So HTTP, anything like that that may not be secure, we can disable those globally, as well as a bunch of other things that we're doing. So again, network management's going to allow you to scale a lot of these things, both from an initial configuration, but just ongoing maintenance. And you can see that as you go from 10 devices to 100 devices to 1,000 devices, these little things that you have here really can save you a lot of time and make sure that you have a lot of consistency between your different configuration settings. At a high level, again, this isn't meant to be an MXV1 presentation, but these are like the 4 things that we do, which cover a lot of the things that you guys mentioned in the poll question. So being able to visualize topology, security, traffic, being able to back up device configurations, do a lot of device monitoring, as well as monitor third-party SNMP devices, and then have all that roll up to a centralized event and notification capability. Just want to take a couple seconds to talk about MX Security. MX Security is our policy firewall centralized manager. So it gives you a centralized way of managing all your firewalls. And one of the things with AI and security, as you go beyond just managed switches to like the next level, you are going to see a lot more firewalls being deployed in your environments. This gives you that centralized management, unified security policy, gives you IDS, IPS to give you that application layer visibility that you don't get with managed switches, as well as a way to centrally collect all that information. This just gives you an example of the topology for MX Security. Basically, it's a central way to manage firewalls across multiple sites. If you guys have questions about this, let us know in the Q&A section, and maybe we can either send you some information or maybe do a piece on that specifically. Basically, the power of MX security is it allows you to take multiple firewalls, like you saw in the previous slide, put them into a single device group, create your policy in the same kind of interface that you have for the GUI of the firewall, and then apply that firewall policy to that group here in step 3, and it pushes it out to all the firewalls across your entire network, even across multiple sites. It eliminates a lot of the human error and saves so much time. Really, the only other folks that have any kind of capabilities like this from a central security policy manager are your traditional IT firewall companies like a Cisco, a Fortinet, Palo Alto, things like that. A lot of our OT security firewall vendors that are specific to OT, most of them do not have something like this. Big differentiator for us. All right, so that brings us to another poll question here. Just curiosity, how many network vendors do you guys have in your network? Are you single sourced? Is it 2, 3, 4, or 5 or more? Again, this is going to help us not only develop future products, but figure out how do we tailor a lot of these webinars and other security topics to what you guys have out there. So appreciate you guys taking a second to answer that. We got some stuff coming in here still, so let's give you just a few more seconds there. All right, looks like it slowed down here, so let me, okay, so you guys can see here. So good news, I'm actually surprised that we have as many of you that are single source or just, 1 or 2 sources. That's huge because it really makes it easier for you guys to manage effectively your networks. For those of you that have a lot of vendors out there, either you guys are doing best of breed types of things, or maybe you could benefit from some vendor consolidation to help make managing your networks a lot easier. Felipe, anything you want to comment on this?
Not really. Actually, I was kind of surprised as well. I was expecting to have more virally in terms of manufacturers. So that's surprising. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, guys. That's really good. All right, let's keep going here. So let me hand this back over to Felipe, and he can close up the webinar.
All right. Thanks, Marty, for explaining more about the capabilities. And I believe the takeaway, it's pretty much around to have the consistency. This is one of the key aspects, visibility, because all the things that I share, they are definitely valuable, but if you don't have the consistency in how you deploy, it's kind of harder to really have the level of security and have the results that respect, right? So just trying to put together 4 main points from all the discussion that we had during this webinar. So the things that we cover here, definitely they are considered somehow basics and a good practice in some manner, right? But definitely we have a lot of other threats that these things will not really protect you against that, right? But our point here is how we make sure we are covering the majority of the attacks that are targeting the industrial control system nowadays. So if you do all the things that we shared and have a strategy like we described, most likely you will be protected with these most common type of attacks. But still, we have a lot of things to keep working with the most sophisticated type of attacks. With that being said, a defensible architecture actually is essential for any industry. So if you are not doing in any means all the things that we share here, I would say that is definitely time to review your strategy and try to. I understand that is hard to go from 0 to 100, but definitely start to create a plan to upgrade and do some things that we're describing here to enhance gradually your security during the time. There are many ways to do it. I described some ways to deploy, for example, segmentation, but definitely you may have other means and other strategies to do it. I believe all of them, they have their value, but definitely I believe it comes in terms of cost effectiveness decisions, right? But we are not saying that you can just do it that way or another way. And the last but not the least, visibility, I would say that is the key word for where we are in terms of security and we are trying to shift the industry. The lack of visibility on the information that we are transmitting and how we are actually creating our strategy and how we see that deployed, it's a big challenge. So if you don't have visibility, you cannot really correct or have any type of action. It's getting hard, right? If you don't have this visibility and definitely this is one of the things that we are start to see more and more, and with the usage of AI it's definitely something that will be extremely important in your industrial control system network. With that being said, I would like to pass over to James to take over our Q&A section from here.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, guys. That was all very informative. We really appreciate all that. Just real quick before we jump into the Q&A, I'm going to put this poll question up, if you will. Let us know if you would like us to connect you with like a Moxa expert to discuss any of the projects that maybe you currently have or have in the works for the future. And we will be happy to reach out to you guys. I'll just leave that on your screen for another few more seconds. But while we do that, why don't we go ahead and progress the slides here and let's get into the Q&A session. We do have a few questions here, so I'll go ahead and tee up the first one. If the company prioritizes AI over cybersecurity protection, how does the defensible architecture differ?
Yeah, I believe Mari start to address that one. I'm glad to elaborate here, but Mari, do you want to take over first one?
So I think the big one is that if you're really just trying to focus on the AI piece, the first portion of it means I got to connect everything. So whether it's an unmanaged switch, fully managed switch, I just got to connect these things together. When you start to think about the security piece of it, I think a big question comes, is the AI models that you're going to be using, are they internal? Are you going to use like a third party? If you are going to use a third party, do you want to give them full access to your data and to those devices? If you don't, I think what we're seeing from a cybersecurity perspective, a much more complex or comprehensive set of firewalls and fully managed switches to limit full access to that. Because I think some people are also worried about if a third party were sharing the data, you really want that to kind of be one way and be able to control what data is shared. Whereas if you're just only focused on the AI piece and not the cybersecurity, some of those other protections may be something that you may not be thinking about as much. Felipe, did you want to add to that?
Not really, honestly. I believe we covered it all. I believe that it's pretty much strategically what your company are trying to achieve. Like you said, if they are targeting more AI, obviously, all the things that we are sharing here, eventually it will not be the primary goal, and vice versa, right? So it's how actually your company is prioritizing. You make the difference in which one actually will win the battle in terms of what should be deployed. So I agree with your rationale.
All right, thanks, guys. Just a reminder for our audience, if you guys do have a question, use that Q&A function in Zoom. You can go ahead and ask it there, and we'll try to get to it. Here's another question from one of our audience members. How is Moxa planning to work with quantum computers? They are hitting the marker by end of 2025, I've been hearing.
Yeah, I can kick it off in the switching perspective, and more than glad if Mario want to chime in and share more information about the other layers. But honestly, in switching perspective, still we are debating about the cryptography, still encryption, right? We have a lot of applications where we are desiring to deploy encryption, but we still cannot deploy it because a lot of the challenge that we have in OT, just to name a couple of them, the latency is critical, and eventually all the devices should be capable to process this information, encryption, etc., and eventually can compromise the latency and the reliability of the system. So just putting one point that I do believe that is something critical, but eventually more for other layers, IT level, where encryption is heavily used. It absolutely will dramatically change the scenario, right? Our encryption that we see nowadays eventually will change. But on the same point, we have the quantum computing. We also have quantum encryption. So I believe we are seeing this threat coming, if you will, not just threat in perspective. I'm seeing more in the secure perspective, right? But I believe we have been preparing. When you see we is basically professionals in general are seeing this quantum computing coming, and they are developing the other hand, all the encryption to be equivalent to the quantum computing. So this is my 2 cents around this topic to layer 2 switches, if you will. But Amari, I don't know if you have anything to add on the top of that.
No, I'm not really the computer guy. This is where, having Oliver or Shahid might have been helpful. Yes, I don't really have anything meaningful to add to that.
All right.
Here's one around MX security. So does MX security manage security policies or manage switches?
Okay, so I can take that one. So MX Security is a security policy manager for our firewalls for right now. It does not manage the security policies of our switches. So it's only the firewalls. So, and what we're seeing is more firewalls being deployed closer to the edge of the network, hence the need to be able to do that. But we're still, I think, trying to find out what interest there would be in having kind of a centralized policy manager for managed switches. So if that's something that you guys would like to see, we'd definitely be interested in hearing from you. I think Felipe would love to hear that, given that he's the product marketing manager for that. So good question, thanks.
Okay. Here's another one also around defensible architecture. So defensible architecture seems to be something that the majority of companies should be implementing. What would be the first step, or what should I prioritize?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I believe 1 million question, right? I would say you have different things that you may do, but what come in my mind at first would, if you were one of the managed customers, for example, this would be a quick win. You try to give some intelligence, right? Maybe jump straightly to managed switches would be a huge jump, right, in terms of pricing perspective. But we have options now that we call, like I mentioned, smart switches or light managed switches, that they have a very good price point that brings intelligence, and we can start to already leverage all the major capabilities that Mari described on the management platform. So I would say this would be a quick win to make that first move in terms of defensive architecture.
Okay, thanks. We do have more questions, but I'm looking at the time. We are actually just a couple minutes over now. So you know what? I will throw out one last question here. How does Moxa license your network management solutions?
Oh, good question. So we basically, all of our network management platforms are what we call perpetual licenses. So they are not subscriptions. So that means you buy the license one time, you can use it for those number of devices for the life of that particular software package. So unlike a lot of our competition where there's some type of subscription based license, this is something that to make it a lot easier for you guys to manage your OpEx is basically an upfront one-time purchase.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Marty, for that. Everybody, I just wanted to thank you all for joining today's webinar. We'll be sending a follow-up email with a link to the recording so that you can revisit any of the topics that we covered today. Also, when we end the webinar, there will be a survey at the end. We would really appreciate it if you could give us your feedback on the content and how we did on this one. So thank you. Lastly, Felipe and Marty for sharing your expertise here on OT network security. Really great information. This will pretty much wrap it up for us here. Thank you everyone for attending, and we hope that you found this information valuable as well. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.